Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Mind Over Masculinity, the podcast where we don't just talk about the strength, but we redefine it. And today's story is one that hits deep, not just for the men, but for anyone who's ever faced a moment that tested everything they believed about who they are. Yeah. So please welcome our guest, Kenny Stoddart. Welcome to the show, Kenny.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to be here with you today.
Lovely, lovely. So, dear listeners, before we delve deep into the discussion today, I'd quickly love to introduce with Kenny. So, Kenny has lived multiple lives in one lifetime. Yes, you heard that correct. Like from closing multi-million dollar cybersecurity deals with the industry giants to conquering the Ironman races, his world was built on achievement, precision, and the control. But life had another plans. A cancer diagnosis, a reckoning with addiction, and a rebirth with purpose. Yeah. And today, Kenny is the founder of Iron Mind Advisors and the creator of the Iron Mind Mentality, a transformational framework for turning pain into power and chaos into clarity. And he teaches leaders, athletes, and high performers that true resilience is not about the domination, but it's all about the surrender, humility, and the healing. So I'll not take much of your time, dear listeners. And Kenny, welcome to the show. And it's really, really, I say your story is the proof that timing and the perspective, it really is everything. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. And I guess thank you. I certainly didn't plan my life to be
Mhm.
full of challenges along the way. And I think that, most people can relate that life continues to throw us different obstacles. And, from the highest level, the Iron Minds mentality is utilizing those obstacles or those moments of adversity as ways of strength, quite frankly. How can we
Yeah.
learn from them? How can we get better from them? How can we use a moment of adversity to, in my case, in this most recent, situation with my cancer diagnosis, to use that forum to spread the word about early diagnosis and things like that.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. And like, uh, you did stepped away from a successful cybersecurity career to dedicate your life to helping others, and that's when the cancer diagnosis hit. So,
Mhm.
what went through your mind in that moment? I mean, if you can share.
Yeah. There's a lot still going on in my mind at the moment. The idea to make a career transformation or a pivot from, just a fabulous career in the cybersecurity industry.
Mm.
I was very fortunate to work with just some great companies and some great leaders, and travel the globe and learn different business cultures. And, I enjoyed it. I was very successful at it.
Yeah.
It allowed me great opportunities. It had also took a toll on my life, on my health, on my well-being, on my, as someone that's common, I'm wired as an overachiever. I like to hit my targets, my goals. I was a quota-carrying salesperson or leader for the most part of my career, and as much as I was wired that way, it ended up taking a toll, and the idea to pivot was just through some, deep thought and prayer and whatnot about, how I want to spend this second part of my life. Now, the cancer diagnosis was, kind of a surprise that happened, like you said, after the fact that I made that decision. So what do we do in these types of situations when, deploying the Iron Minds mentality, if you will? This is not something that anybody wishes for by any means.
Correct.
I don't have time to go backwards in my life. It's just a, it's a mindset. It's a, I want to be optimistic, and I am. And, but even more so, I want to use this as an opportunity to grow from. Yes, I had an unfortunate diagnosis, but it's not going to define me. It's going to be a chapter in my life that I have to deal with. And I'm grateful that I've, thinking with a clear mind and surrounded by good doctors and whatnot. But, I have this mindset that, you know, nothing's going to get in my way regardless of, and that's being put to the test as we
Mhm.
speak.
Agree. Agree.
Mhm.
So, like, did it feel like the universe was testing your decision, or maybe confirming it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe in, being tested by the universe or by certain things like
Mhm.
that. Um, And it's just, I've been tested my whole life, I feel, and
Mhm.
I've had a lovely life, so I don't wanna make it sound like it's been, but everybody in life has struggles, and we can't define each other's or compare them, which one's worse than the other. Everybody struggles in one form or fashion, and the idea is to learn from it and grow from it and use it as a tool. And, I feel fortunate that I've been through some of life's biggest challenges. Um, am I stronger from it? Absolutely. What can I do with it? Well, I can help others. And, that was the decision to go back to school and get my master's degree in mental health counseling because I want to, not only do I want to help, but, there's preparation other than my life experiences that have to go into that. So it's just something that, has allowed me to, you know, give back to people based on some of these life experiences that I've had to endure and learn from.
Mm, understood. So, like, I mean, it's really incredible, but I think like so many men spend their lives preparing for the external battles, but when the uh, fight becomes internal, the rules change, and it's not just about the control anymore. It's just about trusting the process, and that's where surrender becomes the strength. So,
You're right. And surrender, I did surrender not only, with in my recovery process with alcohol and whatnot, but, I was for many years, viewed as the big, strong, man or, the one that couldn't be taken down. But I had to surrender because I was taken down. I was taken down by, um, some of these life's challenges. And I had to give up and ask for help. And that is um, a big step that a lot of people have trouble doing. And, I can say with confidence now that it's probably one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my life was asking for help. I didn't even know I needed it, quite frankly, until I got it and realized that I did. So, yeah, surrendering, whether it's, people can surrender to whatever it is that but at the end of the day, um, it's tough to do some of these things by yourself, and asking for help is a really great place to start.
and like you coach high achieving men through addiction and the grief. So the two topics that most men avoid talking about, like what patterns do you see among men who appear successful on the outside, but also crumbling inside? So what do you say?
Yeah, and I was that. I was exactly that for many years, where everything looked, good on the outside, and things were, I was the one who had it all, but really on the inside I didn't have anything. And I shouldn't say anything, but I struggled for a long time with some of these things that I've dealt with, and finally getting to the point where, seeking help and working through them to getting to the point where I am now, and one of the happiest phases of my life. It does take that vulnerability to kick in. It's very difficult for someone like myself. I asking for help or even finding the right person to help was tough because there's a lot of, well, who should I go to for this? Or, when it came to my challenges with alcohol, I didn't know who to go to. I thought that I was going to be taken away or put away, or like going to outpatient type clinic where I would have to leave the comforts of and just being picky and making excuses. But in reality, that was not the situation at all. I found a situation that worked for me, and
Okay.
thankfully, had the wherewithal to ask about different options, and that ultimately led to me where I am today. Where now I'm trying to spread that there are options that are great options for people that just need a little help getting over to the next phase.
Exactly. I agree. And okay, like what do you say? Like uh and what's the turning point? Like that moment when they finally choose to heal instead to hide.
Yeah, that's the
Mhm.
that is a great question, and the turning point for me, was that moment of surrender where, I mean, it's a difficult moment to even put into words, quite frankly, because
Hmm.
the problem with, finding your rock bottom is, just how far do you want to go or can you go? And, for me, it was enough. It was enough hurting people that cared about me. And, I had friends and family and loved ones that were worried about me. And that really ended up taking a toll on me where I said, enough is enough. And, then I asked for help. And, that's one step of the process. Then you have to put in the work, and there's, the ongoing day-to-day fight against things that we like, and that's what addiction is, and making sure that we're addicted to the right things or healthy things. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was just that moment of knowing when is very, very challenging. And I say to people sometimes, if you even have the thought of you might be in need of some help, that thought is valid and it
Mhm.
should be respected, and it's there for a reason. It doesn't mean that you have a
Mhm.
problem or that you are, um, it just means that maybe you need to talk through it with someone to give you a nudge to get you back on track. And, some of the things that I wish I had along the way, not that, I had
Mhm.
a lot of support in so many great ways, but, I want to give that nudge to people. It's okay to be vulnerable and to ask for help and to even cry or, let it be known that you're hurting. And, um, I'm glad I finally did that.
Understood. Yep. And like I mean, yes, that's really profound because it speaks to a truth that most men don't admit. Success doesn't heal what's unresolved. So yeah, yeah.
And
And
I
like
think the most fascinating thing about, you know, once, and again, the recovery process is just amazing in itself, and we could do another whole show on that. But the rewards personally, not only with
Mhm.
your confidence and, for me with confidence and with getting my clarity back and, just functioning at such a much, much higher level is
Mhm.
makes everything, all the decisions I make to get better worthwhile.
Hmm, exactly. And like your mantra, like this true strength is forged in surrender. And definitely it goes against almost everything that men are taught growing up. So how did surrender become a source of power for you?
Well, through trial and error, I would have, unfortunately, I think I look back at some of the most challenging um, moments in my life that, whether it was, um, I went to military school here in the United States at a institution called the Citadel, and, that was extremely challenging. And then, you mentioned the Ironman races, and, the triathlons, and these are all incredibly difficult challenges that we sign up for, and I did anyway, and wonder how do and get to a point where how am I going to get through this? And you know I learned through some of those experiences, but then life experiences are where the true test of that comes in. And I realized that the only way I was going to get through some of these hurdles that I was being faced with was to tap into what I now call the Iron Minds mentality. Whereas you know no matter what obstacle we're faced with, we are going to you know identify what the problem is, recommit to facing that daily, own it and take full accountability, and then never look back, which is the iron mentality, Iron Minds mentality, but the iron acronym. But in reality, it's we don't have a choice. And then you know but what we do have is that something everybody has within us, and
Okay.
it's this mentality that I'm referring to. I didn't know how I was going to finish the 140th mile of an Ironman race because I was in such a bad spot physically, but I knew I had to do it. So mentally I tapped in. I didn't know how I was going to overcome my addiction. But I tapped into this mentality, like I mentioned, and failure, it was not an option. And that is a mindset that, we have to believe in. And, I truly believe it works because I'm living proof of it and I live it every day. Anything that I, put my mind to in such a fashion has a very, very good chance of getting accomplished. Now, I say that because I think, I'm thoughtful about the things that I want to do, but, unless I want to do them with this level of
Mm.
focus, then, like in a triathlon, you might not finish or whatever it might be, but um, those options don't exist for me.
You got it. And like, how can men begin to practice surrender? Like, especially those who equate it with the weakness or maybe the loss of control.
Yeah, I think it does take some self-awareness. For me personally, I knew that I was not, living up to the moral standard that I wanted to be. So I had this burning desire to do better, um, which ultimately led to, identifying, what the major problems were. And, that took some soul searching. And it was painful, but true. And, you know, going through that process ultimately led me to determine what really is important in our lives. For me anyway, we cannot do anything without our health. In my case, I cannot do anything without my sobriety because without that, I would not be healthy. Without our health, we can't go to work. So, and without our, and that's internal. We can look healthy. We can be strong at the gym. We can run long miles or ride a bike. That's that's fantastic. But healthy on the inside, thinking healthy, making sure you're taking care of your body, especially as we get older, listening to the signs, going to the doctor, which is something that everybody needs to do on an annual basis, and just making sure that, I'm a firm believer in that, and it's potentially saved my life. And so, yeah, it's just going, being vulnerable and recognizing that you are not Superman, or in my case, I was not Superman. Um, and, by recognizing that, I was able to, I need help. I can fix this. I'm going to get help. I started asking questions. I opened up to my family and my close loved ones. And, one thing led to another. And it worked. I'm here today to talk about it. You know, after a year of sobriety and feeling amazing, and my businesses are thriving, and like I mentioned, I'm in school, and it's just, and it feels great. It really does, because I deployed this mentality that I now preach about quite regularly, this iron minds mentality that we can all do this if we want to. I believe that. I really do.
Exactly true. Yep. And okay, I mean, that's definitely a important reframe. I mean, uh, surrender is not just about giving up, but it's all about showing up raw, open, and ready to grow as well. And I would say that is the one of the hardest forms of courage, like because it asks us to face the self that we have avoided, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're saying something, please.
No, I mean, I, what we have avoided, you mentioned, and yes, and as I mentioned, it's something that we all have inside of us. I think anybody who, I mentioned the other day when I was speaking on another engagement about entrepreneurship, and,
Mm,
I said, if you're a successful entrepreneur, um, you already know what the iron minds mentality is because that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur, right? To start a business from scratch, from the registering of the business license all the way to the whatever it is your exit strategy might be. That takes the iron minds mentality. And I know that the entrepreneurs that have done it successfully that are listening know exactly what I'm referring to. Now, if you're not an entrepreneur, but if you're a doctor, you know what those med school exams are like. That's activating the iron minds mentality is how am I going to pass this board exam that is incredibly hard? Well, it doesn't do it itself. You have to
mm.
put in the hard work, but you have to make that commitment that that's what's going to happen.
Amazing, amazing. And this will be kind of contradictory, okay? So I mean, basically, like, does pain always have a purpose? So, uh, people often say that uh, everything happens for a reason, but when someone's in pain, that can sound hollow. So, do you believe that all this suffering has a meaning, or I mean, are there moments where it's just a pain and we find purpose later?
I believe I've gone through different stages of that. As I as we talked about in great detail, I did go through a process of surrendering, and I think that there's a lot of varying definitions of what exactly that means. But one of those things is that, we don't choose the good times and the bad times, right?
Yeah.
And do all things happen for a reason? That's probably a little bit outside of my comfort zone to say. But what I can say is that, like I said, we don't choose the good times and the bad times. And we can celebrate the wins and um, the weddings and the anniversaries and the great times, but we also, we're human beings and everything is
Mm,
not always going to go our way. And, what we do with those difficult times or those moments of adversity,
mm,
um, are monumental career shaping moments in our life. And,
mm,
mine started, in high school. I didn't even know what I was doing when I was expelled from high school after my junior year for just being, a class clown or whatever the reason, it shook me so bad that, I had
yeah.
to rebound with doing something amazing, which ultimately led me, to the Citadel and whatnot. But my point being is that, these letdowns, how do we handle them? Do they let them kick us
Mm,
further down the road? I just can't let that happen. And for me, I don't want any more setbacks, but of course
yeah.
there's going to be. And I'll be ready. But in the meantime, growing from them.
Mm, true. And okay, how do you balance acknowledging real suffering while still guiding people towards the transformation?
Yeah, that's a great question because real suffering is a real thing. There's no, and I don't want to make it sound like this, be strong Iron Minds mentality is just to kick suffering to the side. It really is not. The suffering and the pain that people go through is definitely a real thing. And um, how do I balance them? Now, yeah, like I said, in this moment of surrender where, I accept things as they come to me and I put a plan in place to deal with them, whether I like it or not. And that's just the way it is. But, in day-to-day life, I think that we have to keep things in perspective and, knowing that, like I said, celebrate the wins, but also be aware of the setbacks and how we're going to handle them. Um, I don't want to make it sound like we prepare for, bad times, but the life is full of challenges and that's no secret. And I think that, you know, just making sure that we have the right mindset and, you know, starting with our own personal health. I mean, you can deal with a hardship much better when you're healthy and energetic and your brain is functioning at a high level. You can really help yourself through these tough times. And I think that that would be my number one area to advise anybody is to take just to look at their personal hygiene and health and making sure that and make a change or two if it's necessary to boost that confidence. Um, Starting there is just a huge step in the right direction.
Mm, okay, lovely. And any advice you'd like to share with the listeners today?
Oh, I would love to share lots of advice, but I think most importantly, the advice that I would give is that for men and that it's okay to be I don't it doesn't matter how successful you are or how strong you are or what kind of car you drive or any of that. It's okay to ask for help if things are not right. And even if things are, function you don't have to be um things could be functioning at a high level in several areas, but there could be some missing components that and those things can be worked through being asking for help, talking to the right people about it, whether it's a friend or a colleague or anybody. But don't be afraid and don't internalize it. I think that that's such an important thing is being open and vulnerable um and that would be my guiding advice just to start.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Okay, okay. Amazing. Lovely. So, Kenny, I mean, this conversation has been nothing sort of transformative. And I'd say you have shown us that surrender doesn't mean losing, it means liberating. And um, that healing is not just about the perfection, but it's all about the permission as well. So, to everyone who's listening, if there's one message to carry from today, it's this that the true strength is not in what we conquer, but it's in what we are willing to confront, right? So, um, please do check out Ironman Advisors and Kenny's work if you are working through the struggle, transition, or just want to lead with more grace and the grit. His story is definitely the proof that the hardest battles can become your greatest blueprint for the peace. And Kenny, if someone wants to connect with you, what will be the great medium to connect?
Yeah, I think the best way at this point is to visit my ironmindadvisors.com website, and there's some information there and a sign up link. I do some daily tips on the Iron Mind mentality and things like that. So the best bet would be to be my website.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put up the links in the show notes for your easy reference. And with this hope, until next time, this is your host Avik, and this is Mind Over Masculinity. So, stay strong, keep evolving, keep cushioning, and remember that your mind is not your enemy; it's your forge. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.